Hello learners, my name is Mr. Pochilola once again, representing Black Slides Online tuition providers. We are the providers of high quality education, MSCE education in the field of sciences. Once again, welcome. On this platform, you have the privilege of learning physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics, all for free. All for free. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, and you have all these science subjects at your disposal to learn for free. All right, but if you need this special help or special tuition directly sent to you, feel free to contact us on the number that has been shown on this screen. So welcome to the lesson. This is chemistry form 3. This is form 3 chemistry. We meet in a topic called experimental techniques. Experimental techniques is the first topic in form 3 chemistry. So once again, welcome. Inform your friends that they can learn for free without paying any fees on this platform, on this channel. We offer all science subjects all for free. All you have to do is subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss on any lessons that are uploaded. All right, so this is topic number 1, which experimental techniques. It is hoped that once you finish the topic, you should be able to do the following things. All right, so by the end of this topic, the topic called experimental techniques, you should be able to define the term chemical waste. What is a chemical waste as used in chemistry? What do we mean when we say this is a chemical waste? So you should be able to give a definition. You should be able to give a definition of a chemical waste. What is a chemical waste? All right. You should also be able to identify waste products from chemical reactions. All right. Suppose you are carrying out a chemical reaction in the lab, in the chemistry lab. Let's say you are carrying out a titration. A titration is basically the a technique, an experimental technique of finding or determining the actual concentration of, say, an acid or base. All right, by applying a chemical reaction known as neutralization reaction. So you react a base such as sodium hydroxide, for example, and an acid such as hydrochloric acid. All right, so when the reaction has taken place, what is formed of it may not be usable again. All right, so that's considered to be waste product. So identify waste products from chemical reactions. So in your chemistry lessons in this year, in Form 3, you actually carry out a lot of chemical reactions, all right, through experiments, all right, from different topics, okay? So it is advisable for you to identify chemical wastes or chemical products from a given reaction. For example, when you react sodium hydroxide and hydrochloric acid, what are the products? What are the products? All right, you may have products such as sodium chloride, which is a salt in solution form, but in addition to that, you may also form water. So in this case, salt and water are considered to be waste products. Why they are considered to be waste products is because they cannot be used again in subsequent experiments or activities. All right. Also, in addition, you should be able to describe safe ways of disposing chemical wastes in the lab. When waste products are formed or when wastes are generated in the chemistry lab, you don't just heap them up. No, you don't just heap them up. Otherwise, the lab will be a very dangerous place to work on or to work in. So we must come up with safe ways of disposing these chemical wastes. All right, dispose means to get rid of. All right, to get rid of, so that the chemistry lab remains as safe as possible, as safe to work in as possible. So you are going to describe safe ways of disposing chemical wastes in the lab. All right, apart from defining chemical waste and identifying waste products from a chemical reaction, you are going to describe safe ways of disposing chemical wastes in the lab. As wastes are being generated, you need to find suitable ways of disposing them. Chemicals are not the only wastes that you can find in the lab. You can find also broken glassware, such as broken beakers, broken test tubes, broken measuring cylinders, and others. All right. Sometimes wastes can include the chemicals that are expired. All right. Once chemicals are expired, they become unusable. Therefore, they are to be considered as chemical wastes. So what is the safe way to dispose them off? All right. Additionally, you should also be able to design a scientific investigation. Remember that chemistry in general, or sciences in general, are experimental in nature. You need to carry out experiments, scientific investigations, and all that. Unless you know how to design a scientific investigation, you cannot carry out a successful experiment. So you are going to be able to design scientific investigations, scientific experiments in chemistry. Right. You should also be able to carry out scientific investigations to determine the purity of a substance. Okay, using what we call criteria for purity. In this topic, you're going to learn how to determine the purity of a substance by boiling point determination, melting point determination, and a technique known as paper chromatography. All right, so carry out scientific investigations to determine the purity of a substance. Last but not least, you are going to describe simple tests for water. How can you determine that a given substance contains water? Right? So there are two techniques that you are going to employ using what is known as blue copper sulfate, and anhydrous copper sulfate, which is in most cases white. So when you add a substance that is suspected to contain water to a white anhydrous copper sulfate, you are going to observe some color change. All right. Apart from that, you also use anhydrous cobalt chloride. All right. You are going to learn about all these things and in this topic. All right. You also you should be able to describe simple tests for ions. Remember, ions are charged atoms. All right, we have two types of them. You have what are called the anions, which are negatively charged, and the cations, which are positively charged. All right, so how can you determine their presence in a substance? All right, we are also going to describe simple tests for different gases, namely testing for hydrogen, which makes a pop sound when ignited, and also oxygen, which relights a glowing sprint, and the other gases such as chlorine gas, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and the other gases. So what are we saying? We are saying that to show that you have truly learned and understood the topic, you are going to define the term chemical waste, identify wastes from chemical reactions, describe safe ways of disposing of chemical wastes in the lab, and designing a scientific investigation, as well as carrying out scientific investigations to determine the purity of a substance. And lastly, but not least, describe simple tests for water, ions, and the gases. So these are the measuring tools to show that you have actually understood the concepts, you have understood the topic very well. Welcome to the definition of a chemical waste. What is a chemical waste? How will you define a chemical waste? All right. Okay, so we are going to define a chemical waste in the following manner. All right. A chemical waste, as used, the term chemical waste as used in chemistry in this topic, is defined as a product or unwanted material from a chemical reaction or an expired product. All right, so we are saying that chemical waste is a product. So first of all, it's a product. All right, so when you carry out any chemical reaction, the product thereof is considered to be a waste. In most cases, the product can be a solid. It can be a solid. It can be a liquid. It can be, even sometimes, it can be a gas. It can be a gas. All right. Also, a chemical waste can also be any unwanted material. Any unwanted material from a chemical reaction. All right. So it's unwanted because it may not be required. Such a material may not be required in any activity in the laboratory. All right. Okay. An expired product is also considered to be so we are saying this is not required in the subsequent lessons or activities. All right, so we are saying that an expired product can also be considered to be waste, okay? Because expired products may no longer be useful in any activity in chemistry, and if kept in the lab, it may pose a danger. It may pose a danger. It may become toxic and hazardous to the laboratory users. So we are saying that expired products are also considered to be waste. So once again, I believe you have captured the definition of a chemical waste. A chemical waste, we are saying, is simply a product or unwanted material from a chemical reaction or an expired product. Usually expired products or expired chemicals may not give desired results if used in a chemical reaction. So for that reason, there is no need to keep such products in the lab because they may become a hazard to the laboratory users. In this case, the teachers, the technicians, the laboratory technicians, as well as the students. All right. So what are the examples of chemical weights? Mind you, these chemical weights are the ones that we are available in the laboratory. So we are limiting ourselves to chemical weights that are found in the laboratory, chemistry laboratory. All right. So examples of chemical weights shall include, but not limited to these. There may be others which we have not listed down, but the main ones include expired chemicals. Remember, expired chemicals are not usable. They may not be usable. So we are saying they're not usable again in the subsequent activities. All right, so these are not usable. They're expired. If you use them to carry out any chemical reaction, they may not give desired results. They may not give desired results, so therefore they are considered to be weights. Chemicals that whose containers are not labeled are not known exactly. We don't know what these are, so they are considered to be weights. So these are not known. They are unknown chemicals. They are unknown chemicals and therefore may not be used. So you remember that most chemicals in the lab look clear as colorless as water. Therefore, it will be difficult to distinguish them. It is difficult to distinguish them. So, unlabeled chemicals, therefore, are considered to be useless, and therefore, they are considered to be weights. They are weights because they can pose a threat to the users or in the laboratory. Okay, so they need to be considered to be weights. Unlabeled chemicals are considered to be weights. Waste papers are also considered to be chemical weights. Waste papers are considered to be chemical weights. Usually these are papers that you use for wiping or cleaning your bench in case of spillages. If you have a spillage, you can use tissue paper, for example, to wipe. So the tissue paper in that case is considered to be waste because it is no longer required in the laboratory. Broken glass, like the test tubes, broken test tubes, broken beakers, broken syringes, broken burettes, pipettes, and all glassware are considered to be weights in the lab. So they need to be carefully treated and disposed of so that they don't pose a danger to you, the user of the laboratory. All right. Chemical spillages, sometimes in the course of carrying out a chemical reaction, some chemicals can spill on the benches where you're working. They become chemical weights. And they need to be handled carefully, as some of them may be toxic, may be hazardous. All right. Some chemical reactions produce gases such that if those gases are inhaled, they can pose a danger to you. So we consider fumes and the gaseous products from chemical reactions to be chemical wastes. All right. And any other chemicals that are contaminated, in case, say for example, you have sodium hydroxide and it's accidentally mixed with, say, another chemical such as maybe sulfuric acid. So this results into a contamination. So the contaminated chemicals are also considered to be waste because if they can no longer be used. All right. So in this definition, we are saying a chemical waste is a product, okay, or it can be an unwanted material from a chemical reaction or an expired product. Examples include, but not limited to, expired chemicals, unlabeled chemicals, waste papers, broken glassware, chemical spillages, fumes and gaseous products from chemical reactions, as well as contaminated chemicals. All right, so I'm sure you have captured the definition of a chemical waste and the examples of chemical waste. Great. So how do we dispose of chemical waste in a safe way? We are looking at the safe ways of disposing chemical waste. How can we get rid of chemical waste in the lab so that the lab becomes a safe place to work in? If we don't dispose of chemical waste in the lab, it is going to be very dangerous to work in it. So we need to devise means and ways of getting rid of chemical waste as they are being generated. All right, so we are going to look at a number of ways of disposing of chemical waste in the lab, or getting rid of chemical waste in the lab. One way is to use normal waste bins. So we have waste bins that are placed strategically in the lab so that as the wastes are being generated, you can dispose them off by simply throwing the waste into such waste bins. So this technique is used for waste such as non-recyclable plastics that cannot be recycled, pieces of wood, rubber, and data papers. All right, so when you generate such waste in the lab, all you have to do is collect them and dispose them off into the waste bins. Simply throw them into the waste bins. Right? Okay, so please take note which wastes can be disposed of using waste bins. We are saying non-recyclable plastics, pieces of wood, rubber, and data papers. The second way to dispose of chemical waste is the use of special controlled waste containers. All right, special controlled waste containers. All right, so you also have these strategically placed in the laboratories at one particular corner, designated corner there. As these wastes are being generated, you collect them again and dispose them in such containers. So these are used to dispose of sharp objects like scalpels. Right? If you don't handle scalpels carefully, you can hurt yourself. You can cut yourself. They are very sharp in most cases. So when they are due for disposal, carefully collect them and dispose them off into special controlled waste containers. Broken glassware, sample tubes, items contaminated with hazardous chemicals, all these can be collected and disposed of in special controlled waste containers. So sometimes the containers may become full. That's why there is need for you to for them to be emptied all the time, and they must not be allowed to overflow, because if they overflow again, they'll become a hazard to the environment in the lab and they pose a threat, a contamination threat to the laboratory users. All right, So we are saying that in order to dispose waste, we use normal waste bins, which are designated for recycling, or rather for disposing of non-recyclable plastics, pieces of wood, rubber, and dirty papers. We can also use special controlled waste containers, which are used to dispose sharp objects like scalpels, broken glassware, sample tubes, and items contaminated with hazardous chemicals. All right. So the containers must be emptied all the time and must not be allowed to overflow. So the one responsible will carry the container and dispose these to maybe a landfill or a place which is chosen by the school for disposal of waste. So you take the container and empty it there. Don't allow the containers to overflow while it is in the lab. All right. Another way to dispose waste safely in the lab is to drain into the sink using a lot of water. So there are certain wastes that do not need the containers. All you have to do is drain them into the sink using a lot of water. Usually your laboratories are fitted with the water sink and a water system network for running water, tap water, so that you can either wash your hands in it or drain waste into the sinks that are placed under the taps of water. So wastes which can be drained include harmless inorganic salts. Examples of such salts are copper sulfate salts, copper nitrate, silver nitrate, zinc sulfate, and others. You can dispose these solutions of these salts into the sink. You can also use sinks to drain or to dispose of contaminated and used acids and alkalis. All right, so we are saying this technique can work best for disposing of harmless inorganic salts, contaminated and use the acids as well as alkalis. Remember that alkalis are bases which are soluble in water. Examples of an alkalis or an alkaline solution is sodium hydroxide, aluminum hydroxide, and the other hydroxides. These are called alkalis. So in solution form, they can easily be disposed of into the sink with a lot of water run into it. Very important to note. The next method to dispose waste is what is called incineration. Incineration is simply the use of heat in a designated system or structure. Okay, it's incineration. All right, so some schools have incinerations where waste can be burnt. So wastes are put into an incinerator. That's the system, the structure in which the burning process is done. So wastes are put into an incinerator and burnt. All right, the key word there is burning. So incineration simply means burning waste. Okay. So wastes that need to be incinerated include syringes. Syringes are basically, most of them, plastics, needles, or organic solvents. Examples of organic solvents include some acids, organic acids, alkanones, and others. Soluble organic wastes. Okay. Remember that organic solvents or organic wastes are combustible, so they can be burnt for that purpose. All right, soluble organic wastes. All right, soluble organic wastes. I think this was repeated. Paraffins and mineral oils. These can burn in it can be burnt in an incinerator, and their impact on the environment is reduced in the process. Very important. So we are saying once again, we can dispose of wastes by using normal waste bins. For example, disposing of non-recyclable plastics, pieces of wood, rubber, and dirty papers. We can use waste bins just to accumulate them, collect them into the bins, and transfer the bin and with the wastes in it to a designated place away from the lab where they are finally disposed. Sometimes they are buried there. All right. Some special controlled waste bins can also be used to dispose of sharp objects such as scalpels, broken glassware, sample tubes, and items that are contaminated with hazardous chemicals. And the containers must be emptied so that they are not filled up while the containers are in the lab. All right. Okay. So draining into sinks with a lot of water can also be used as a technique to safely dispose of harmless inorganic salts, contaminated and used acids and alkalis. Incineration is used to dispose of wastes by simply burning. So wastes that need to be incinerated include syringes, needles, or organic solvents, soluble organic wastes, paraffins, and the mineral oils. Okay, so this was kind of repeated. All right. Last but not least, another technique of disposing waste is what is called the recycling. All right, so wastes that can be disposed of by recycling include, but not limited to, unbroken glass. All right. So the unbroken glass can be recycled. It can be blown. Okay, it can be blown into other materials which can be used again. Packaging wastes and the paper can also be converted into something that can be used again. All right. I hope you are okay having gone this far. Now, to show that you have understood what you've learned in this lesson. This is basically lesson number 1 of the topic called scientific experimental techniques. All right, so define the term chemical waste. So in the lesson today, we've looked at the definition. I would like you to define the term chemical waste in the way you understand it, not necessarily copying from the definition that we had earlier on. All right. We've also looked at 3 ways of disposing of chemical waste. Can you describe any 3 ways of disposing chemical waste, giving 2 examples in each case? All right, so describe any 3 ways, just any 3 ways. We've looked at a number of them, just any 3 ways of disposing chemical waste, giving 2 examples in each case. Then explain the importance of disposing of waste. Why do you think it is important to dispose of chemical waste in the lab? Okay, and then he defined the terms incineration and recycling. Well, what do you think these terms mean? We have not looked at the definition yet. Can you try to define what we mean by incineration and what we mean by recycling? You can look them up from the internet and other sources, and then you present them in form of exercise. Name any 2 ways that can be recycled. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure teaching you in this lesson number 1. This is lesson number 1 of the topic experimental techniques. This is the first topic in Form 3 chemistry. I've been your teacher, Mr. Paul Chilola, once again. See you in lesson number 2 of the same topic. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.